If you or someone you know is struggling emotionally, having thoughts of suicide, or substance use problems, confidential help is available 24/7. Call or text the Crisis Lifeline at 988.
Peer support is me using this lived experience that at one time was the darkest hours of my life, the most tragic things that ever happened to me, and giving it purpose and letting it stand for something better.
Because there were times, where I really thought about ending my life. So to be able to have somebody to talk to who understood me, to show me that life is actually worth living, so I don't think I'd be in this chair without peer support.
I'm standing here in front of you. My kids have a mom. My husband has a wife. My mom has a daughter. They don't have to visit me in a cemetery. That wasn't the end of my story.
It started off really slow for me. I didn't realize that what I was receiving through treatment was actually peer support. It was others sharing their lived experience with me to help support me and find that connection, find that relatability, and they spoke my language.
"25 years ago, in the heart of Georgia, a quiet revolution began. It would change the landscape of mental health care all over the world. At its core are certified peer specialists, individuals who have walked the path of recovery and are now extending a guiding hand to others in need and getting paid for it.
I share my story. I don't just share my success. I share my story. My gratitude to all the people that didn't shut the door, but they opened the door and made a welcoming place for me.
One of the awesome things I think emerged in the 90s, Ike, if you recall, is we started using the word recovery.
Wendy Tygreen and Ike Powell were two of the early pioneers, along with Larry Fricks, who set out to change the way Georgia treated those diagnosed with mental illness.
I remember one of the insights that came in around this time was if you focus on weakness, people tend to see themselves as weak. If you focus on strengths, people tend to see themselves as strong.
And that changed everything because people with mental illness began thinking, oh, I can and will be better. Larry Fricks was the head of what was called the Office of Consumer Relations.
Peers were critical to me getting back a life.
He said, what about this idea of individuals who have a mental health condition and they are beginning to be well and healthy themselves?
Peers literally made the difference in me believing that I could have a life in the community and that I could recover. And
what about them helping other people begin to find their own recovery? The idea was brilliant, right? It made complete sense.
Not everyone agreed. Remember, this was back in 1998. Mental health advocates were still dealing with major stigma.
I remember one mental health professional saying to me, if you put two crazies together, they'll both get crazier.
The boarded-up buildings at Central State Hospital in Milledgeville serve as a reminder of how Georgia and the rest of the country treated the mentally ill. In the 1960s, the hospital had 200 buildings on its almost 2,000-acre campus, serving 12,000 patients.
Each year at Christmas, there would be a toy drive in Dublin, and we would take these wrapped gifts up to Central State Hospital, and these kids would come out in these paper-thin cotton nightgowns, no shoes, behind this chain link fence. What I learned through that experience, even though we were taken there to, as service, was not to ask for help. because that could be me too, even at a very young age. And there was something different in the way I thought, the way I process information, the way I feel. And decades of not trusting anyone began.
Once home to the largest mental health hospital in the world, Central State now stands as a symbol of transformation, from institutionalized care to community-based care. Certified peer specialists now strengthen the fabric of our communities by sharing their experiences to help others.
We did have the largest insane asylum in the world that had 12,500 people locked up in it. At one point in time, it has 25,000 people buried on the grounds. We're not proud of that, but we're proud of where we came from there. And I think that's what happened here in Georgia. There was just so much that needed fixing that it took a movement to make it happen.
Larry Fricks was the face of peer support back when not a lot of folks wanted to raise their hand and say, yeah, I'm mentally ill and I'm in recovery and I'm doing great and look at me.
What we are doing is saying that we value your lived experience of recovery. We value the strengths that you use to recover, and with some skills that we can train you to do, you are keeping people out of hospitals, you're saving taxpayer dollars.
Slowly but surely, we began the path from a concept in Larry's lens to taking it all the way to federal Medicaid for approval.
It took some determined leaders and a little bit of creative licensing to get the program off the ground.
And I got to tell you, I get calls from all over the country, and they say, how did you get the state of Georgia to certify peer specialists? Did you take it in front of the legislature? No. Well, how'd you do that? And I'm really kind of embarrassed to tell them that after the first class, went through training, I went down to the Xerox room and I got the state of Georgia logo, and I got the Department of Human Resources, Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Addictive Diseases, and I put it on a certificate, and I Xeroxed it, and I never asked permission from anybody. I swear, you go down there and you ask permission for the state of Georgia to put their name on a certificate, and the lawyers would have gone, liability! Oh my God! So we just did it, and nobody noticed it. And then the next thing you know, the governor writes this story about this peer workforce and Georgia's leadership. And so that's the story of how Georgia backed its peer workforce. It all happened at a Xerox machine.
I look at leaders in Georgia like Larry Fricks, people who put a face nationally on mental illness and were not afraid to put themselves out there. Those folks are the ones who demanded peer support specialists, demanded that they have peer support, demanded that they be at the table.
July 1st, 1999 was a pivotal day. The feds told Georgia if peers went through training, they could be gainfully employed, their salaries paid by Medicaid.
The largest insurance company in the world was able to say, we approve this.
There has been no other revolutionary change like peer support in this system in the course of my lifetime.
I mean, if Georgia hadn't started it, I don't know if it would have happened. It happened at the right moment, at the right time, with the right people.
But if we look back at the historical context of this, it all started by Georgia being a leader and saying, we are going to provide Medicaid billable services for peer support. A lot of those recovery movements happened in church basements. And I think it was very much shame-based. And I think Georgia just drew a line in the sand, put a stake in the ground and said, this is not something to be ashamed about. This is something that we are going to champion and that we are going to get behind and we are going to support. And this is an important, valuable service for our consumers.
Not only did Georgia lead with being able to be the first state to get their state Medicaid agency to buy into reimbursing Peer Services, they took the time to help other states do the same thing.
They're all envious of Georgia and where we are with our peer support. You know, one of the things, no matter what type of recovery we're talking about, whether it's recovery from addiction or whether it's mental health recovery, or whether it may be a combination in our forensic population, no one can touch someone in a way that leads them to recovery more than someone who's walked in those shoes before. And they're able to communicate in a way that helps people not only get to recovery, but stay in recovery.
I grew up in a family that at the time as a child I felt was very dysfunctional. There was a lot of love in the house, but I always felt like I was a bit of an oddball, like I didn't fit in. By the time I was 12, I was using drugs and alcohol to numb all of these feelings that I had. I had no idea that, you know, it would turn into a life of destruction, and it did very quickly. A girl from the club asked me one night when I was in shambles on the bathroom floor because I just could not cope anymore. She said, you know, I have something that will get you through the night. And that was when I was introduced to heroin. And, you know, it stole my soul. I fell into some of the darkest days of my life, and it led me to homelessness in the streets of Atlanta. I remember being in the Bluff and sleeping in abandoned houses and panhandling, and you know, it was not the life that I imagined that I would have.
Claire Bonnell started to imagine a life focused on recovery. Thanks to a probation officer, she started that journey, which led her to becoming a certified peer specialist.
One of the most paramount things that I remember is I started working in mental health, and I had to get cleared by DBHDD to work because of my criminal record. And the building that DBHDD was originally housed in is the same building that I had my first probation hearing in. And to come full circle was unlike anything I'd ever experienced.
Certified peer specialists must go through specialized training, the curriculum first developed by Ike Powell. The peer movement has spread and is used in other areas, including addiction, and in hospitals, jails, and schools.
One of the things about being a peer specialist is it quickly offers you a job.
Right.
And a way to give back when you think you didn't have anything to give back.
Certified peer specialist trainings like this one are now happening across Georgia.
Not only can you hear it, but you can respond in a way that that other person feels heard, understood, and respected.
There's a sense of accomplishment just from getting here, but our challenge to them is to keep growing and keep developing as a peer recovery support service provider.
2024 makes 16 years in recovery. For me, the CARES training provides tools to make me that much more effective with being able to come with, as an advocate, with the message of, let's get clean. There's another life that I believe in you, you can do it.
The question to start with is what's right with you, as opposed to what's wrong with you and how can I fix you.
The reason that I think it's so important, especially for young people, is because being able to build a point of connection, not solely on situations, but on the feelings. Being able to relate and say, yeah, I have felt alone. I have felt misunderstood by family members, by friends, and creating that safe space of relatability is paramount. That was something that was paramount in my journey.
No matter what was going on, how great my life was, I suffered from a depression.
Evan Brown shares his journey of mental health challenges and addiction.
So I had addictions to methamphetamines, marijuana, opiates, and alcohol were some of the big ones.
But from that pain emerged a calling, a desire to turn his experiences into a beacon of hope for others. After stints in prison, Brown got help through his church in Warner Robins and found a peer specialist through the Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network.
They believed in me. They actually put a lanyard around my neck. And I was like, wait a minute, isn't that for the leaders? And the lady told me, she said, you are a leader. You just don't know it. And since then, I have just chased after this recovery, and door after door after door has opened for me.
In Albany, Brown is now a certified peer specialist in mental health and addictive disease.
I myself, being diagnosed with bipolar, was told that I would never hold down a full-time position. I now work a very full-time position, two different departments.
He even uses his criminal past to help law enforcement de-escalate tense situations that could lead to violence.
The pain of my past became a purpose. I get to, every single day, see that recovery is real, that we do overcome, and I get to be your advocate, your voice until you find your own. I get to be the person that supports you and loves you through a journey until you're able to love yourself.
And I think what we championed early on is we weren't diminishing any other aspects of healthcare. We were bringing an enhancement to this.
I've lost 3 brothers to suicide, my mom to an overdose, right? So a lot of people look at me and they're like, I don't know how you work in this field. And I'm like, I don't know how I could survive not working in this space. And so being able to tap into that and actually help somebody else find healing is healing for me. And so honestly, I don't know where I would be without this. Peer support has changed my life. And quite honestly, it was actually a peer who told me and gave me the hope to recognize that I don't have to be on disability for the rest of my life, that recovery is an option. Something that I picked up early on in my peer career was what the devil meant to destroy me, God has used to employ me. And what that ties back to is something that I learned early in my recovery, and that is we can only keep what we have by giving it away.
In 2006, the Georgia Crisis and Access Line began taking calls for anyone experiencing a suicidal crisis or emotional distress. On July 16, 2022, the federal government began the transition to 988, an easy-to-remember 3-digit number for 24/7 crisis care. Think of it as the 911 for mental health and addiction. Ruth Escamilla says the crisis line saved her life.
I'm standing here in front of you. My kids have a mom. My husband has a wife. My mom has a daughter. They don't have to visit me in a cemetery. That wasn't the end of my story.
Her story began in her teen years.
I've been living with this since I was a teenager. I know what it was to be 17 and not have a clue. To be in a room of 4 walls that I wish could speak back to me. So my diagnosis is bipolar and severe depression. I also deal with severe anxiety. But with my second pregnancy, I was dealing with a lot. Crying. I didn't understand. Things were constantly triggering me. I was extremely depressed. I attempted suicide with my being full pregnant. So my doctor, as a OB, she didn't know what to do. And so I think that in her practice, she humbled herself. She humbled herself for me. And I think my life meant something to her. And she called the crisis line for help. And that was the best thing she could have done, because she could have just put me on pills, and she could have signed for me to be hospitalized. And I was able to be introduced to a crisis line that would offer more support and resources that were familiar with people that are suffering with the diagnosis. 988 gives people an outlet. It gives people a resource to say, I can call that number. It's available. It's being publicized everywhere. And And you don't have to feel ashamed. And you don't have to sit up here and think, who's going to help me? I don't want to call the police. I don't want my family to call 911. I was able to start healing from all the past trauma. It connected me to people that share the same lived experience as me. And now I'm empowered.
Escamilla now works as a certified peer specialist for the Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network.
My tears are not in vain. My suffering is not in vain. Someone out there is suffering and living in shame. Today, you can call 988. They'll connect you with the right support. They'll listen to you. They won't hang up on you. They won't shame you. They won't try to fix you. They'll connect you with peer specialists. They'll connect you with resources. You're not alone.
I think 988 has the ability to completely transform the behavioral health system. And I think peers are the driving force to actually making that come to fruition. Peers at all levels of 988. So when we think about somewhere to go, someone to call, and someone to respond, peer support should ideally be embedded into all three of those areas. Yes, there still might be clinical services that get added, but having peers embedded in that system at all levels of 988, of the crisis system, is really what's going to transform the system.
And no doubt, that will put more pressure on a workforce already facing severe shortages.
We're going to see an increased demand for the need for additional peers of all kinds.
Hello, you've reached 988 BP. How can I help you today?
Peer specialists are working all over the country in aspects of 988. And they're working in call centers. They are receiving texts and chats and responding to them. They're working on mobile crisis teams.
If people are watching and listening and they have lived experience and they really want to be able to give back and help others, there's opportunities at the department and through our provider network to get trained and become a certified peer.
We are definitely heading in an area where there is going to be more demand. It's some uncharted territory, and it's kind of like the whole 911 system when that first started.
I personally believe 988 has the capability of just transforming everything. So far, I think we've seen really good results, really powerful results, and not just the individual stories, but the data overall.
Chris Johnson and Heather James are part of the Georgia Consumer Mental Health Network, one of the largest and oldest peer-run, peer-led organizations in the world.
This movement was born in Georgia. I'm working for the organization that kind of helped birth the movement. It's a little surreal.
Mental health advocates say 988 and peer support are helping to overcome stigma.
It helps stigma so much. So I think for me, especially within the Black community, we don't talk about mental health. For so many of us, we kind of grew up being told, you don't air out your dirty laundry, you keep it within the family. It made me feel shameful. It made me feel guilty, like I did something wrong. So to meet people who are experiencing the exact same thing that I'm feeling, or similar, lets me know I don't need to feel guilty.
There is hope, there's help, and there's recovery. And it is available to you with the right supports and the right mindset. And peer support is just one of those crucial tools that seems to really jumpstart and sustain recovery in ways that so many other services have not been able to achieve.
To me, we got to continue to be the best. And we got to continue to improve and get better.
So if you're having mental health challenges, addiction challenges, you're just stressed about life, being a parent, because maybe you're having challenges with your child who's having mental health challenges or addiction challenges, peer support is for you. I mean, like I said, it is for every single person. Life is going to life.
There's something so unique about peer support because the connections that you build are amazing. And it's not that any of the peers that I worked with were specifically telling me what to do with my life. They were acting as an understanding soundboard that helped me to talk about the choices that I wanted to make and helped instill support and love in myself to be able to execute those choices. And I don't know of any other practice that is able to do that.
They took the pain of my past and created for it a purpose to allow it to reach someone else and show them that there is a way out, that we do recover.
That I sincerely believe in the power and the strength of peer support. It has changed my life and changed the life of not just dozens.
It's possible for people to recover from mental illness. And that is something we never dreamed of when I began working.
If you or someone you know is struggling emotionally, having thoughts of suicide or substance use problems, confidential help is available 24/7. Call or text the Crisis Lifeline at 988.